Are you struggling to find the birth date of an ancestor? Are there just no birth records that were available at that time? Well, today you are in luck because I'm going to be giving you some tips on how to find that ancestor's birth date when no record seems to exist. Hi, I'm Lisa Lisson with Are You My Cousin, and I help genealogy researchers lose the overwhelm and start finding their ancestors. Before we get started, if you don't mind, if you could do me a great big favor, I'd appreciate it. Just hit that subscribe button down in the bottom right hand corner. That way you won't miss any of the YouTube videos that I post here on the Are You My Cousin YouTube channel. Okay, let's talk trying to find that ancestor's birth date. I know it's frustrating when you are trying to find that ancestor's birth date when there's really no formal birth record. But as researchers, we just have to look at it from a different point of view. Now, the first thing I would tell you to do would be to make sure that you are setting yourself up for research success from the get-go. In other words, I want you to make sure that you understand the area, the location, and the time period that you are researching for your ancestor's birth and their life. And what I want you to make sure is that you understand what records exist, what records do not exist, what records were generated but maybe did not survive. In other words, make sure you know what's available and what's not available so that you're not wasting time researching for a record that does not exist, didn't survive, or maybe it was never created in the first place. Okay, so let's get talking about 8 alternative sources to find your ancestor's birth date. Number 1 is the family Bible. Now, before you roll the eyes and tell me, okay, no family Bible exists on my side of the family, I get that. But are you sure there's not a family Bible out there somewhere? Check with collateral ancestors, check those lines, check other researchers, even check online family Bible projects for your local area. There is potential to find the evidence of a family Bible, but that you weren't aware of previously because it simply didn't come down your side of the family. So make sure you're checking all sources for that. Church and baptismal records can be very helpful when it comes to establishing a birth date, as well as parents for an ancestor. Census records. Check the dates. Sometimes you'll get a month and a year, oftentimes just a year, or you may get an actual, just the age of a person at that time period. Now, we know that can be a lot of variations there. So sometimes you can simply, the best you'll be able to do is to infer that birth date, but as you go track them through the census records, you may be able to help narrow that down a little bit more. Check the wills. It could be a parent's will or it could be their own will. You can find evidence of a birth date in those documents as well. Particularly if they appear in a parent's will, it could indicate if that person was a minor, and if they were a minor, in general, you're going to think that they're probably less than 21, but make sure you understand what the age of a minor was for that location in that time period. So check that to see what clues you might be able to pick up for a birth date. Guardianship records. So if your ancestor's parent passed away, their father passed away, there may have been need to set up a guardianship for that ancestor. And if that's the case, you can infer some ages. Sometimes it will actually state the age right out, but if you follow the guardianship records and you follow it through to determine when the guardianship ended, you can infer an actual age for a child, or for that minor when they become no longer a minor, they're a legal adult. As long as you know, again, what the rule was, what the law was for that area, you can infer that they might have been 21, or if they were a female, maybe they were 18, then you can back up and infer a birth date that way. Gravestones. Absolutely. Check for those gravestones because you very well could find certainly the birth year listed there. Now remember, it may be accurate, but it may be off by just a little bit. Sometimes that happens on gravestones. Those are considered secondary sources, but absolutely there are sources you're going to look for. Sexton records are another one. Now, the sexton records are basically the cemetery records, say for the cemetery office or the person who was in charge of the cemetery. Check those cemetery records because you can find some amazing information, not just a birth date for your ancestor, but you can find information on other ancestors as well and other family members who are related to that ancestor. So I would absolutely encourage you to seek those out. And lastly, I like to call this one an out-of-the-box idea for inferring a birth date would be tax records. No, they did not put a person's age in the tax records, but based on the law, based on who was required to pay a tax, you can infer a general age range. You can, when somebody, if you have a young man and you're tracking them and all of a sudden he starts to appear in the tax records and you have a general sense of when they might have been born, you can determine that maybe they had just turned 21 and they were now legally required to pay that poll tax. It really depends on the tax law for the area that you're researching. It could be that somebody actually ages out of the tax. There were limits on ages of who had to pay certain taxes in some areas. So you could actually, if you're following your ancestor along and they pay in taxes, you find them in those tax records year after year and all of a sudden they disappear, but you know they didn't die, they're still there. Well, maybe they aged out of paying taxes at that point. So check to see what that age would be, that age requirement was. So you can infer an age there. So just because your ancestor didn't have a birth certificate doesn't mean you cannot find a birth date. Now, in some cases, you may not find that actual birth date, but you will find clues to be able to infer a birth year or a birth date. And that sometimes that's the best that you're going to get with that, but still, those important clues are there and you can use those in your research. Okay. Before you go, I'd encourage you to hit that subscribe button down below. That way you won't miss any of the new videos that are posted here on the Are You My Cousin YouTube channel. And I hope you have a great day. Bye.